forced into existence by warring dynasties and driven underground to grow in power. For centuries, their global reach has increased through fear, symbolism, blood rites, and secrecy. There is no criminal act so despicable in which they do not eagerly participate if an illegal profit can be made. Use their name with caution. It is Triad. Back at a time when nomadic tribes still roamed North America, an already ancient civilization on the other side of the globe was giving birth to a sophisticated organization. In recent years, this organization has grown into a global network, ruling the lives of millions of people by terror and intimidation. Today, we know them as the Triads. But it was in the 17th century that the true Triad societies began to establish. They were born out of the struggle between two dynasties battling to control China. The ruling house, the Ming, found itself under attack and eventually overthrown by the rival Qing Empire. Among those who came to the aid of the doomed Ming were the Shaolin monks, the same order made famous by the television series Kung Fu. The Shaolin's abilities in martial arts were so fearsome that Qing ordered them to be destroyed. Their monastery was burned, and the entire Shaolin community, so one story goes, was killed, with the exception of a small group of monks. It was told they went underground, formed secret societies built around patriotism, as well as a severe code of loyalty to other members of the group. In this earliest form, they were groups of people who came together for mutual interest, for business, or simply family or clan ties. They were anything but criminal. This is what sets the Triads apart from other organized crime gangs. For centuries, they were, and remain to this day, an integral part of Chinese history and heritage, often doing a lot of good in Chinese communities, both in China itself and in other nations as the Chinese spread around the world. The descent into criminality started taking place over a number of centuries after they became outlaws. The Triads played an extremely active part in the politics of ancient China. From time to time, Chinese dynasties are either overthrown or created with Triad help. The emperors would use them as guerrilla fighters or a secret service. This intermingling of politics and society formed an important foundation in Triad development. To understand it, we need to look at how Triad societies actually work. Retribution against their own members or others for minor infringements is often swift and brutal, but seldom fatal. It's been said a dead man is forgotten, but a crippled man is an example forever, especially when he undergoes a chopping. As disorganized and random as this attack seems, centuries of rituals are still adhered to, and the power structure is steeped in tradition. The Triad family tree can change from order to order, but essentially sees the dragon head or leader at the top of the society. He may have made the optional posting of a deputy leader. Then come the other ranking officials, such as the incense master, who is in charge of the rights department. The red poles is a strong-arm man of the society, responsible for leading the fighting sections during warfare. The grass slipper carries a title of messenger, and his importance may be better expressed as liaison officer between societies. Ordinary members or soldiers make up the bulk of the members. Finally, the Blue Lanterns are members who have not yet taken their oaths. This title comes from the tradition of hanging a blue lantern when there is death in the family. But in this sense, they are reborn as Triads. Each area of rank is assigned a number. The significance of many remains obscure. It's suspected they have close connections to Chinese numerology. Perhaps the most straightforward meaning is that of the ordinary member who takes number 49 and multiplied to equal 36, the number of oaths sworn to become a recruit. Although now simplified, these original 36 oaths formed just a part of an initiation ceremony which would take several days and required the offering of total loyalty.
I shall not disclose the secrets of the family, not even to my parents, brothers, or wife. I shall never disclose the secrets for money. I will be killed by myriads of swords if I do so. I must never cause harm or bring trouble to my sword brothers or incense master. If I am arrested after committing an offense, I must accept my punishment and not to place the blame on my sword brothers. If I break this oath, I will be killed by 5 thunderbolts.
One man who has made the study of triads almost a life's work, the British author Martin Booth. Concern for his safety is so great that we are only able to briefly glimpse the man himself, and his location must remain secret. He says even before the triads moved into global criminal activity, they brutally enforced the loyalty of their membership.
Triad oaths, if they are broken, are usually met by a severe physical form of retribution, quite often the murder of the perpetrator of that, or the breaker of that oath. Traditionally, this is caused by, they would call it 1,000 cuts or 100 cuts, depending on which society you're in. It basically means that you would be attacked with something resembling a meat cleaver, if you like, but very sharp, and you would basically be hacked to death.
The name triad itself is actually an English term derived from interpretation of the earliest triad symbol, that of the Hung League. This is a rubric of the 3 society names of heaven, earth, and man, hence a 3-cornered or triangular symbol which gives us the name. A fascinating sideline to this history is a design found in many Western homes. The willow pattern that adorns so many pieces of fine china is thought to actually be triad-based. The original story of 2 young lovers fleeing a cruel Mandarin father only to be eventually caught and killed is an invention to explain a design that has a much deeper meaning. This deeper and spiritual meaning is for the Hung Brethren, from the original surviving Shaolin monks. Scholars believe the design was made to encourage each other in a time of persecution. The 3 figures on the bridge are not 2 lovers being chased by a Mandarin, but 3 Shaolin monks. The burning of the house and the false story actually represents the burning of their monastery. The doves the gods turn the dying lovers into represent the soul of the Hung hero making his journey to paradise. It was from this ancient and mystic past that the modern triads emerged. They traveled with a massive Chinese diaspora of the 1840s and 50s as gold lured huge numbers of Chinese to the United States. With the coolies came the triads, and with big money to be made, triads began to emerge as something far more sinister than malevolent societies. However, it needs to be understood that these triad societies are very much a part of everyday Chinese culture. If you look at Chinese communities in California or Australia in the last century, the triad societies, while criminal in Western eyes, actually did a lot of good work for people in those communities who are often racially abused and socially shut out. Mark Craig is a former law enforcement officer with wide experience in the Asia-Pacific region. He says traveling with this cloak of respectability allowed the triads to prosper. They moved into criminal activity in a big way in revolutionary China before, during, and after World War II.
Triads have been abroad probably around about the time of the major Chinese diaspora, which is, let's say, around 1840, 1850. They travelled to South Africa, Canada, America, Australia, around about the time of the gold rush. That's when we probably first saw triads internationally dispersed. Now, in terms of criminal activity of any significance, it probably wasn't until post-Second World War.
When China descended into the chaos which came with the Sino-Japanese War, World War II and the Revolution, the triads were there. They often played both sides off the middle, always looking for power, influence, and money. While some triad societies sided with the communist forces of Mao Zedong, others took the opposite position. Some worked directly for the Japanese, and still others worked as part of a complex intelligence network with an occupied China during the Second World War. But as the war came to an end, the communist Chinese took control of the mainland, It was a hardcore triads who went with Chiang Kai-shek into Taiwan, the British colony of Hong Kong, both of which were to become the locus of triad activity worldwide. It was to be in the turbulent Asia post-World War II that the triads began to indulge in criminal activity of any real significance. Triad groups such as the United Bamboo Gang emerged in Taiwan in the early 1950s. They were mainly the sons of prominent national leaders like Chiang Kai-shek. The mid-50s also saw the emergence of the 14K triad, which to this day remains one of the most powerful in the world. The K in 14K stands for carat. In the late 80s, they had 30,000 members in Hong Kong alone. From San Francisco to Sydney, it is this name that is synonymous with triad. The Sun Yee On was founded in 1921 and is said to be the most conservative and traditional of the Hong Kong triads. Still using ceremonies like the 36 oaths we've already seen, Sun Yee On initiation can still also involve cutting the throat of a chicken, collecting the blood in a cup to be mixed with Chinese wine and blood from recruits. This is then called red flower wine, which initiates drink to bind them to the society forever. The 1950s and 60s was a time for consolidation of triad power in Asia and in some parts of the United States. They moved into almost every area of organized crime, from prostitution to people smuggling, extortion, and drugs. But all the while, they continued to back up their power in the political arena. One man who experienced this firsthand in a most brutal way is former Hong Kong police intelligence officer Conan Lamont. Under growing anti-British gang pressure, Lamont was almost killed when a triad masterminded bomb he was attempting to disarm went off with fatal consequences.
They started putting a couple of hundred bombs out a night. A percentage of them were real, a percentage of them were fake, but they slowed everything down just the same because you didn't know until you'd got them open whether they were real or not. There were teams of police, and as you could appreciate, very few experts, but these were homemade bombs anyway, so there was no manual to tell you to move the red button to the left. You had to really discover it as you were opening it, just how it worked, and try and be a second guess and be a jump ahead. And the one that got me on September the 3rd, 1967 was one armed with a timing device, so it wouldn't really have mattered if what had happened. I was standing or kneeling over the top of it 1 minute, got a premonition, if you like, that something was wrong, took a step back and it blew. 3 plugs of gelignite went up 5 feet away. Oh yes, I was lucky to survive. There was a fire officer 3 stores up and 75 feet up the road who stuck his head out to see how I was doing, and he was killed with a flying fragment. Others were injured, and I was unconscious for a couple of days after I'd run around the street giving orders in shock, and then eventually hospitalised. We believe too that there was a certain amount of, there was a criminal element involved in that, obviously, because disruption of the colony served the interest of crime.
For police with Hong Kong street experience like Conan Lamont, seeing triad victims maimed by choppings but left alive was an all too common occurrence.
The reality is that you didn't see the sort of overt machine gunning of people in the streets that we all know about from Al Capone days and Untouchables movies. The idea of driving around with somebody on the sideboard with a machine gun blasting shop fronts isn't part of Chinese culture. People hobbling around victims and still alive are a constant reminder in the village that that's what happens to you if you don't do what the triads say. And certainly the Mafia idea of omerta, of you just don't talk about it. That's an important part of it. No one will tell you the innermost secrets of the Mafia, the Triads, or for that matter, I guess, the Masons. I mean, the whole idea of secrecy is all part of it, and that's part of their defence, I suppose, is that they've got everybody scared witless so that they're not going to have to worry about anybody really talking to the authorities.
Sergeant Dan Foley of the San Francisco Police Gang Task Force has first-hand experience of the brutality and changes in attitude to some of the old ways of triad conduct.
In the case of a loan shark victim or somebody that owes the triad a favor, they would most likely maim that person in order to collect the money eventually from them. But on the other side, when there's enemies and they're trying to take control, they would prefer killing the individual because leaving that person alive will make that person more powerful. So enemies they want to kill, victims they want to be examples to others.
But with growing experience, the San Francisco Police Gang Task Force were able to react to now familiar patterns of organized criminal behavior.
As we look back in the history of San Francisco, there's been a lot of activity involving triad or secret society operations for many years, but as of recently, as early as 1989 through about 1992, an individual by the name of Peter Chung came from Hong Kong. He's a member of the Wo Hop To Triad. He was able to organize independent gangs within San Francisco to attack and take control of Chinatown from the gang that had controlled it for many years, which was Hua Qing. As a result of that, there were numerous murders on both sides. There were arson fires and some very serious crimes that occurred, recruitment of young people to commit robberies to further the activities of the Wo Hop To and trying to build a base here. When Mr. Peter Chung came to San Francisco after traveling around the United States, we in the San Francisco Police Department Gang Task Force, along with other federal agencies as well as state agencies, recognized what was going on. We were able to deal with it fairly quickly. Within 2 to 3 years, the whole organization was brought down. Mr. Peter Chung had fled to Hong Kong, then Macau, and is now being brought back to stand trial federally, along with other people that were leading the organization.
The big time, though, was just over the horizon. The triads burst onto the international drug scene largely through the efforts of one man, a sinister and clever gang leader who realized it was time to take a far more business-like interest in the drug trade.
The triads really came into big money. They really hit the big time when the international heroin trade started up. And they were immensely important in the establishment of that. A Hong Kong Chinese called Ng-Sik Ho, who was nicknamed Limpy Ho because he walked with a limp, was probably the most important. He and two other men, were the most important in establishing the heroin trade in the world. And Ng-Sik Ho was the most important one where Europe, and certainly the east coast of North America is concerned. He was the first triad to go at the heroin industry with a businessman's eye. His organization was exceedingly good. His network of couriers, if you like, was exceedingly good. He struck up an alliance in Amsterdam with the Chinese triad group there, and he and they together more or less set up the heroin trade as we know it today.
Limpy Ho was eventually to be successfully charged along with his wife. A major breakthrough for Hong Kong police, but by this time what he had set in place was bringing in billions. It's been said if it's heroin, it's got to be Asian, and thoroughly organized. Hong Kong triads and to a lesser extent Vietnamese and Taiwanese gangs control the heroin trade because a majority of heroin source plant opium is grown in the Golden Triangle of Laos, Burma, and Thailand. This is where this load came from, 420 kilograms of heroin, one of the biggest hauls in Hong Kong history. It was bound for the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe. To snare this catch, the Hong Kong police spent 6 months investigating a local drug consortium. It was found hidden in 30 travel bags in this house on mainland China. Also seized were automatic weapons and police scanners. Hong Kong was founded on the drug trade. In the past, it was opium for China. Today is heroin for the world. It's all controlled by a strict corporate strategy, a business plan that takes a profit at every level down, from the major importer to the street-level dealer. And this profit is amazing. A farmer in Burma may be paid $25 for a kilogram of opium. By the time the product hits American streets, it's worth over 1,500 times that amount. Almost no other product enjoys this ratio of markup. This is why the drug trade is believed to be the third most lucrative business on the planet, right behind the international money trade and the oil business. Triads are good businessmen. They understand that to be successful, you first monopolize the product and its distribution. Then you brand it with a marketable image, like the growing heroin chic, making the drug appear mainstream and recreational. Then you expand market share, which is exactly what they did here in Oakland, California. But in a spot check on containers shipped from the Far East, a drug dog uncovered 480 kilos of pure heroin disguised as birthday presents.
Happy birthday, heroin.
All but a small amount of the drug was removed. Then began an elaborate surveillance operation with 100 undercover officers. A U.S. Customs helicopter shadowed a truck which picked up the shipment and headed for a warehouse near San Francisco.
We're as low as we're going to go. If we stay down here and stay orbiting, they're going to go ahead and spot us in a few minutes.
When a suspect spotted a remote-controlled hidden camera, the police moved in. 3 men are now serving long sentences. It's a sad indictment that globally, human beings spend more money on drugs than on food. But the Triads has been a formula for success. The enormous cash flood provided by the international drug trade financed the Triads even deeper into other criminal activities. By now, they were well entrenched outside of China, throughout Asia, and on the west coast of the United States.
The main locus of triad activity in the world, when we talk specifically about triads and not Chinese organised crime, because there's a distinction, is Hong Kong. Hong Kong and Taiwan. Activities are based on geographical disbursement, so there's always going to be fighting for turf. For example, this is a typical triad fighting implement right here. This is a sort of well, it's a food chopper. And the triads actually fight with these. And they undertake what's called a chopping, where they attack people and they hack them with these things. These are razor sharp. In places like Hong Kong, it's very difficult to get hold of a firearm. So violence with a firearm is not so frequent. So that's why we see resorting to these kind of traditional weapons. Internationally, it's a little bit different. Gang wars have spilled over very significantly into the United States. We only have to look, for example, at the Labor Day massacre of 1977 in San Francisco that became known as the Golden Dragon Massacre. That was particularly nasty. What happened there is that a new group of Hong Kong immigrants had legally come into the United States. Some members had formed a gang called the Joe Boys. They did not respect the established order within the Chinatown community. They did not listen to the established elders and what the Tongs said. They were going to start their own gang. Now, of course, there's only so much turf to go round. They burst into the restaurant, had automatic weapons and handguns, let go. Didn't hit one Wai-Ching gang member, but killed 5 innocent people, 4 of whom were Japanese law students celebrating a graduation. The other was a waiter who happened to be coming down the stairs, and as he came down, they just they stabbed him. I think they stabbed him in the throat. As a result of that particular altercation, the San Francisco police established what is still in existence today, the Gang Task Force, and they were instrumental in actually cleaning up Chinatown.
So how does a petty triad gang leader make his way up in the world? His choices are varied with a common theme of crime. He may choose to move into thuggery, where he can collect gambling debts, provide transport couriers for drugs, or even supply security. Or he may want to start his ascent in petty extortion, running young girls as prostitutes, recreational gaming, and street traders. Or if tough and smart enough, gang rivalry may be his choice. He'll settle inter-gang disputes over territory and organize muscle for fights. A favorite and simple technique of recovering bad gambling debts used by the Triads is called ATM extortion, a method where even an empty account can produce cash on demand.
Ken. Hello. Look, 2 more weeks. I have your money. Wrong answer, Ken. I swear, I have the money. Wrong answer, Ken! Let's go to the bank. Make a withdrawal. Huh? My account is empty. I have nothing. You're a very bad gambler, Ken. Now get our money, please. I told you, it's all gone. But 2 weeks, and I know I have enough. Ring your mother, your father, your uncles, your grandfather. We don't care. Tell them to transfer the money in your account. I don't think. Does your mother love you? What? Or would she like to see her baby sent back to her? A piece at a time. What do you think? Huh? Hand first? Foot maybe? Nose? All right. All right. Father, I'm in serious trouble. Sir, your mother does love you. It's my uncle. Whatever. See you next month. Oh, here's your receipt. Account balance, 0.
The legend of triad brutality continues to grow. They are now well known and feared well outside of the Chinese community.
They originally came from Canton or Guangzhou, and they were Red Guards, or former Red Guards now, that were incarcerated in various so-called gulags or concentration camps around Canton. Some were freed, others escaped and made their way to Hong Kong. There they had a commonality between each other and soon became referred to as the boys from the Big Circle, i.e. the circle of concentration camps around Canton. This was a term that they didn't give themselves, but other people like the law enforcement people gave to them. Very quickly they organised themselves and they specialised in the armed robbery of jewellery stores in broad daylight. And they would use automatic weapons, AK-47s and hand grenades. They didn't care who got in the way. Very quickly the triads realised they had a problem on their hand because the whole crime thing is territorial in Hong Kong. It's all divided and you just can't go into somebody else's area and commit these kind of crimes. But the Dahunjai didn't care and they actually took them on and had the triads kind of beating a fast retreat. Anyway, from there in the 70s, the Dahunjai evolved into a very, very powerful crime group, established a good core source of funds and migrated to the United States, Canada and Europe. In Canada today, they are deemed the #1 threat to law enforcement. They maintain an organisation of 1,000 strong across the country. Now, where they differ from other organised crime groups is they operate in cells of about 10, and they base their whole structure on something not unlike a terrorist organisation, such as the IRA. In other words, it's highly compartmentalised. So if somebody is caught or does in fact become an informer, there's not much they can give up. The illegal immigrants coming from places like Fujian and Zhejiang province, moving into Europe, very quickly became inducted into these established Dahunjai groups. So what law enforcement now talk of as second and third generation or second and third waves of Dahunjai.
Anyone who betrayed a triad or took them on met an organized retaliation dealt swiftly and brutally.
Oh, they're organized and they are loyal to each other. They have the same sense of cohesion that the Mafia has in Italy and the IRA used to have in Ireland and the rest of it. And if they have to do a piece of work, that is, if they have to kill somebody in order to protect the group, they will do so without hesitation.
The ruthless efficiency of the Triad organization has continued to place it at the forefront of global organized crime. In the 80s and 90s, new opportunities presented themselves.
The staple business, for example, let's look at Sun Yee On Triad. In Hong Kong, they control the entertainment industry, from making movies right down to the local karaoke bar. Of course, prostitution, all the vice industries are the staple of all the triads and all the Chinese crime groups that operate at that sort of basic crime level. When we get up into the more sophisticated operations, we're certainly talking about narcotics importations, arms trafficking, and the big one for the last sort of 15 years is people smuggling. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Australian Police Commissioner Peter Ryan was trained by Scotland Yard and the FBI. Running one of the largest police forces in the Southern Hemisphere, Commissioner Ryan says he has no illusions about triad involvement in the people trade.
We are so close to other countries which have enormous population, billions of people or hundreds of millions of people who are living in an impoverished state, or they are under a pretty strict regime and they want to escape. Therefore, anyone who wants to escape can find anybody to transport them. And certainly we've experienced here in Australia a large increase in the number of ships and people coming in by legitimate means through the airports, of people who are illegals in one form or another and who want to make Australia their home.
In Australia, arriving illegal immigrants from Asia have become a familiar sight. These boat people are often exhausted and desperate families. But recently authorities couldn't believe it when a boatload of the healthiest refugees had ever seen arrived in a rusting hulk fitted out with highly sophisticated navigation equipment. It turned out that these 139 refugees could pose a very real threat to national security.
In some cases, it's been discovered recently that some of the people who've been traveling here on ships have been brought by one particular organized crime syndicate to do two things. First of all, they do it for money, but secondly, to boost the numbers of the triad members here in the country so that they could outnumber the next biggest triad organization. So it is becoming a problem for us, but it's one where we are having quite a large degree of success as well.
For example, the crime groups operating out of southern China in connection with triads in Taiwan and Hong Kong have smuggled throughout the 1980s 100,000 people per annum to the United States alone, at an average charge of $35,000 to $50,000. As you can understand, it's big money.
Mark Craig's experience with triads had left him in no doubt as to their capacity for brutality. He tells a chilling story of how close death can be in dealing with gang members, particularly for courageous officers who work undercover.
I have a friend with the New York City Police Department, a Chinese American, and he spent a couple of years undercover in a particular Chinese organization in Manhattan. Anyway, one day he was bringing in two out-of-town criminals from a different organization into New York. And they were in the out-of-town car, so it had out-of-town number plates, obviously. Anyway, a traffic cop stopped the car and spoke to the driver and made some disparaging comment in terms of his ethnicity.
Good evening, gentlemen. You realize you're doing 65 in a 55 zone? License, registration, please. You gentlemen off to a Chinese tea party, are you?
Went back to his vehicle to, I guess, to get his citation book.
The out-of-town triad gangster became extremely agitated by the police officer's provocative comments. He drew a pistol and wanted to kill the officer. The undercover policeman thought quickly and removed the threat. Mark Craig recalls the officer's words.
If anybody's going to shoot this cop, it's me. You're in my town. You are insulting me. I'm going to lose face here. I'm going to shoot this cop. Okay? But I'll do it when I'm ready, and now's not the time.
Hey, gentlemen, try to take it easy tonight. Thank you very much.
And so the whole thing was cooled down and went on.
So just how do law enforcement agencies here and worldwide deal with such a strong and ferocious network of evil? Almost impossible to penetrate. The individual triad gangs are also moving more and more into legitimate business, owning their own banks and often having budgets bigger than some entire nations. Here we see a police operation about to hit the streets of Hong Kong. Customs officials are moving out to raid the territory. Tonight's target are the young hawkers of pirated music CDs. There are many arrests of hawkers as young as 12. They're often used as expendable workers by the triads. Any tourist who's been to Hong Kong knows that when it comes to counterfeiting, the Chinese are hard to beat. Music CDs and computer software expertly copied and often undetectable from the original, except for their low price, turn over multi-millions. The average careful tourist can avoid becoming a part of the pirating problem, but a more sinister trade in recent years, catching many, is a cloning of credit cards. They are surprisingly easy to forge. Magazines brazenly advertise the equipment needed to create the cards. All you then need is a current credit card number obtained from someone's card without their knowledge. The nasty surprise is when they get the bill. China is attempting to crack down on its billion-dollar cloning industry that also includes the perennial favorites of Rolex watches and Gucci bags, but it's a tough battle. This raid netted the triad operating the hawkers. He was arrested, but he's not worried as long as there is big money to be made. A fine of a few $100s will only have these criminals laughing authorities in the face. But the smiles of contempt can also turn to explosive expressions of outrage. Hong Kong recently saw arson attacks on 6 government vehicles in revenge for the jailing of a triad leader. Hong Kong has the toughest and most comprehensive laws against triads. The specifically tailored Society's Ordinance Law and the Organized and Serious Crimes Ordinance enhances a police's ability to investigate triad-related offenses. Triad membership or merely claiming to be an office bearer for the triads makes the offender liable for a fine of 1 million Hong Kong dollars and 15 years imprisonment. Like crime investigators worldwide, Commissioner Ryan says that organized crime gangs like triads have evolved into incredibly complex organizations. They have tentacles into legitimate business and share methods of operation with other international crime gangs.
Organized crime generally is very difficult to pin down in terms of who is masterminding what. Most of them have branched out into other activities which provide a legal or semi-legal framework. They, as we all know, a lot of Russian organized crime gangs actually own banks. They own investment and money laundering organizations which appear to be legitimate on the surface, but in fact are just a conduit for drug money or drug running or whatever.
There are signs that major inroads have been made against the triads in many areas. But law enforcement officers once found it almost impossible to penetrate the triad societies. One major reason for this was their ability to melt into a community and to terrorize people. While strutting the international crime stage, triads continue to stand over members of their own communities.
The kidnappings for ransom and murder that take place around the world, predominantly within the Fujianese illegal community. Now, the gangs that have sprung up in these communities, like the Fuk-Ching gang in New York City, for example, who maintain a hardcore membership of 500 gun-carrying people, these gangs have made their big money through people smuggling and narcotics importation. Now, to furnish their cash flow, they engage in kidnapping for ransom. Now, there's one particular case that springs to mind that involved a group called the Flying Dragon. What they did in this particular instance, they kidnapped 3 people, all separately, all unknown to each other, all randomly. Had the particular victims place a phone call back to China under duress, extreme torture as a matter of fact, seeking $36,000, 36 being a significant number in triad mythology. So what they're doing, they're sending a signal to the family in China that you're dealing with triads. In this particular case, the poor family couldn't come up with more than $5,000. So what they did on a subsequent phone call, they took a Chinese meat cleaver, not unlike this one, and removed her small finger. Unfortunately, the family could not raise any more, as it turns out, and they ended up murdering her, not after torturing her for 2 weeks.
Ultimately, the experts are unanimous on one point. We will probably never be able to stamp out the triads. A recent report states that worried Chinese authorities believe there may be as many as 150,000 criminal gangs with over 1.5 million gang members connected to large syndicates now operating in China. However, 1998 saw world-leading 3,500 criminal executions carried out there, harsh steps to discourage the rising flood of criminality. Police Commissioner Peter Ryan says anti-crime forces around the world are now enjoying more success, but admits it's never time to be complacent.
I'd rather not say we were losing the war or winning the war, but to say that we're keeping abreast of the changes in organised crime, the people who are behind it. We've had some very, very significant seizures of heroin, particularly. Only last year we seized a ship carrying somewhere in the region of 400 kilograms of heroin, a street value of nearly $500 million or thereabouts. We've seized a number of ships carrying people. We've caught people coming in at the airport. We've disrupted money laundering chains, and we've arrested quite a few senior gang leaders. So we're on top of these people. But the problem with it is, of course, that organised crime always finds a new outlet for its activities. No matter how careful we are, no matter how good the police are to track them down, the moment we're on their tail, they move on to another enterprise. They have far more money than law enforcement. As you know, many of these major international gangs have got more money than many countries have. So they can very quickly change their activity from one activity to another.
As long as there's a criminal dollar to be made, they will pursue it with a ruthlessness matched by few other crime syndicates. The global criminals continue to evolve and change faster than we can move against them. However, no one is throwing in the towel.
It is, of course, right that Western governments, and indeed Eastern governments, Chinese government, the Taiwanese government, should act against organized criminals. They undermine society. Having said that, the Chinese triads are a fascinating difference. You can't say that the Mafia are a part of Italy's heritage, or the Cosa Nostra is a part of Italy's heritage. But you can say that Chinese secret societies are integral to Chinese society. They have their roots in the culture of that country. For centuries they were accepted. And in some Chinese communities to this day, even though they may be parasitizing that society by demanding protection money and so forth, they may also be benefiting that society in some instances. To criticize the triads as criminal gangs is right today, but you have to realize that historically they weren't criminals. They were often outlaws, but they played an important part in the foundation and development of Chinese history.
You can't even eradicate triads in their own home turf, Hong Kong. That will never happen. Even though it's been illegal, for example, in Hong Kong to be a member of a triad since at least 1840. It hasn't been eradicated. And I don't think within the West we have any chance of eradicating foreign-based crime groups such as these different Chinese groups, because they are far too sophisticated and we actually know very little about them.
Well, I think what they're finding, the myth that this secret society that no one will cooperate with law enforcement, namely the victims won't cooperate or their own individuals will not cooperate, has been false, because we've gotten great cooperation through witnesses in the community and outstanding cooperation from their own members who find themselves having a problem with particular cases and are willing to give up everybody. So as law enforcement and community started understanding that these are just people and they're criminals, and we can have an impact on them. And through mutual cooperations with countries, if we can't get them here, they may be able to get them someplace else and put them out of business.
So now, after centuries of battle against a sinister network of crime and murder, the war is set to continue well into the new millennium. As long as the triads can continue to adapt and refine their highly efficient and ruthless network, law enforcement officers admit they will never be totally destroyed. That does not mean defeat. It means we will just have to continue the fight against what remains as the world's largest crime syndicate. I'm Robert Stack. Thanks for joining us.